Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's power session. As always, very excited to be here with you today as we dive a little bit deeper into the mind, into the construct of how our thoughts are interpreting and filtering and distorting and challenging reality. It's very important. Any of you that ever do any work with Habit Finder, any of you that are looking to develop or improve oneself, to understand that your reality is not the reality. Now, there are two types of people, those that will react to that, to wanting to hold tighter to their reality, to want to convince themselves even more, to need to be right even stronger, and those that find incredible freedom in that realization, to be able to understand, wow, maybe the way I'm thinking about things is not totally correct. Maybe the things I believe about what I deserve, about what I'm worthy of, about how the interaction with that person is going to go, or how if I accomplish this, how this person's going to respond to it. Maybe there are some things to question. Maybe there are some challenges to be able to consider from a different place. This is one thing that we want to make sure that we consider and consider carefully. Oh, hang on a second. Can you still hear me? Okay. My computer's having some issues with its memory. Let me see if I can get this back up. Fortunately, the sound is still working. Why are you having so many challenges? All right. We're going to get this figured out. Bear with us. Let me go back in here to my camera. There we go. Awesome. Good. We got it. Excellent. Give everybody a chance to get on here and get the juices flowing, thinking about what is it that you want to get from today's power session. Like what's going on in your world, what's holding you back. And hopefully what we share today in this particular arena can give you something to grab onto to progress. So without further ado, and hopefully no more technical challenges, let's go ahead and dive in to today. And we're going to dive into visualization. But first, let's get this thing started. Hello. Welcome to this week's power session. My name is Paul Blanchard, president of Habit Finder. Very excited to be with you today. Today, we are taking on a giant. We are taking on a titan in terms of the gifts that we have as human beings that no other creature on earth has. And that is the gift of visualization. That is the gift of metacognition, to be able to go into our minds and replay the past, go into our minds and play out the future without it actually being here present right now. What an incredible gift. But as any major gift, it can be incredibly destructive. Before we get too far into today's topic, I want to share something that was so profound from our Habit Finder Coaches Mastermind. Every Tuesday morning before this session, I get to be together with all of the Habit Finder coaches that can attend on a weekly mastermind call. And we were talking about this very topic today, which was perfect because it was what I wanted to share in our power session. And one of my coaches by the name of Joe Rangel, said something that I absolutely loved. He said, one of the keys of our personal growth and one of the reasons we want to master visualization is to be able to understand the difference between there is something fundamentally wrong with me and there is something wrong with the way I'm thinking. And most people have a meshed, tangled version of the two. There is something wrong with me, and there is something wrong with my thinking because I am my thinking. That is a major challenge. One of the first things we try to do with our clients, the first things we teach them as soon as they're looking at the results in the Habit Finder. And those of you not familiar with the Habit Finder, this is a proprietary tool that we've created. Took millions of dollars, couple of decades with a few 100,000 people to get it honed into what it is today. But in less than 10 minutes, it will scientifically and mathematically measure the way you think, your unconscious patterns of thinking, giving us quadrillions of variables in those patterns so that when we work with you on your mindset, when we work with you on your goals, on your plans, on your connections, we can do so with a roadmap of how you actually think, which is exactly what allows us to make personal development personal again, rather than promotional development, which is what it has seemed to turn into today. And making personal development personal again allows us to, first and foremost, help you understand one of the simplest and most powerful concepts there is in this arena, and that is that you are not your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. That is neither an invitation for you to judge them and own them, nor is it an invitation for you to dismiss them and ignore them. That is an invitation for you to find total power, total availability, total curiosity, to start examining, even observing your thoughts differently than you have before, to be able to ask yourself questions you hadn't considered before. Often after taking the Habit Finder, you end up asking yourself questions and finding answers to questions you had never thought about asking, to be able to grow into more of who you are. Now, as we learn more about ourselves, which comes from the suspension of the natural tendency to own the way we think, that what goes on up here is us. It is not. It certainly influences us. It's vital. It's important to understand our thoughts. And it's important to understand that they impact our decisions. They impact our emotions, the actions that we take, the decisions that we make, and ultimately the results we create. But you are not your thoughts. This is such a critical prerequisite to anything that you want to actually grow and sustain that growth in, let alone today as we talk about one of your greatest gifts, the gift of visualization, the gift of being able to close your eyes to open your mind. That is profound. The fact that you can eliminate one of your senses to be able to enhance the ability to see things with your eyes closed that you would never be able to see before, to replay and learn from things that you didn't notice before, to be able to visualize both forward and retrospectively is one of the most powerful gifts that we have. And yet, as any powerful gift, it can destroy us. I've often compared visualization to nuclear power. It can be formulated and harnessed to power a city for centuries with no emissions. It can also be formulated to level that city. Okay, I was sharing that with someone the other day and said, so visualization's like Chernobyl. It can be. It certainly can be something that can just destroy lives. Not even figuratively. I mean literally destroy lives. But it can also be something that can save them. It can be something that can enhance them. There is nothing incredible on this planet, innovatively, that has not come from the gift of visualization. It has not come from the gift of courageous men and women who saw something that didn't currently exist and were able to take the steps to dream in reverse, to have the courage and the confidence, the persistence, the patience, the suspension of judgment to be able to actually create it. But here's the challenge. If we're not aware of why we are visualizing, if we're not aware of the state that we're in as we are visualizing, then we will have no chance of being able to control its intention. And it is its intention that hinges, that is the fulcrum of whether it is something that can uplift us and empower us or something that will destroy us. So let's make sure we're clear on what visualization is. Visualization is the ability to see things that haven't happened yet. We can even use it in retrospect to learn things that we didn't notice when we went through something the first time. Okay, and recall. But most commonly, it is an offensive, it is a forward-facing tool, an ability to be able to visualize how a job interview could go, to be able to visualize the next home we want to move into. And we start to play out these scenarios, even if it's just to visualize what it's going to be like to no longer need to be here at the office today and to be home. Visualization can be used in very small micro things. It can be used in very elaborate things. It is an amazing gift, but if we don't understand why we're using it, if we are not honest And I don't mean honest in terms of explicitly honest, in terms of we are totally in control and totally aware of that honesty. I mean the implicit, I mean the implied honesty that we are actually capable of hearing why we're going there. Because too many people, and in our research over the last 20 years, we found that it's over 90%, that is staggering. 90% of people that visualize regularly do so destructively. They do so for a couple of very particular reasons. The most common destructive reasons for visualization are to escape from your life, to avoid something in your life, to be able to fantasize or catastrophize, to be able to use our mind to create something that we won't have to actually do the work for. It becomes like a drug. If I want to feel ecstasy, if I want to feel on top of the world, and I don't want to earn it, I can take a drug and I can experience it. There are lots of options to do so. The challenge is because I didn't earn it, I cannot sustain it. And then equally, the challenge becomes finding a more and more powerful version of that drug to get the same high. Not all that dissimilar with the drug of visualization. To dream about something we want, or to worry about something we'll never have, or that will never happen. Both serve a similar purpose. Both remove us from engaging in our life. If we can be super worried that if I take that new job, my life will fall apart, then we don't have to be accountable to doing it. If we can be super worried that we're not a good leader and we can't step up and we can't show up for those people, then we never have to actually build that following or that business. Equally, if we can just fantasize about what it's going to be like and get that hit in the brain, that dopamine, that high, then why would our brain ever support us in the grueling sacrifice and seasons required to build what we actually want, to earn it, and to be able to sustain it? We want to be able to do this constructively. What that means is making a decision to engage in life, which means we will actually suspend judgment in our brain and listen to both sides of the conversation. Let me finish both sides of the conversation. We'll come back to that piece. On the left side of the conversation is escape and avoid and fantasy and catastrophe, all of which are full uses of the mind without any accountability, without any persistence, without any grind to be able to create it. On the right-hand side of visualization is creation, to engage, to be able to dream and rehearse and plan and learn and set goals constructively. That's on the right-hand side. The left-hand side is a revolving door. It's something that's very tempting to go into. Okay, it's very easy. You don't have to travel very far to get through it. And you're not actually going anywhere. So we don't have to be accountable to what we find, other than just being able to get the high of what it will be like when. Or even the high, as strange as it may sound, of the catastrophe of worst case scenarios. So why even try? Why put ourselves out there? We need to protect ourselves. Equally as powerful of a high to the brain, the part of the brain, the most powerful part of the brain that's tied into your nervous system, that just wants to keep you safe, keep you predictable. It finds just as much of a high from the fantasy of what it could be like if, without having to be accountable to it, just dreaming about it, as much of a high as it finds from the catastrophe of the worst case scenarios that also release you of the accountability of having to do something about it, sending us into this revolving door of never getting anywhere, continually popping out where we started, but our brain expecting something different. Our visual brain, not the keeping us predictable brain, our cognitive visual brain that goes, wow, that would be amazing, but spends all of its energy, spends its powder on the fantasy or the catastrophe, leaving very little traction left, very little momentum or drive to be able to actually create it. It's so important that if we are going to become dream creators, we understand this fulcrum of our visualization. Every morning, do we wake up choosing to engage in life, or do we choose to escape it? And guess what? You don't get to choose to engage it every single morning. You are human. There will be times where you can't help. You've been driving too hard, too fatigued, too stressed, too worn out to be able to stand up to your brain's carnal desire for life to just be easier. So that's okay. So first, we're going to want to suspend judgment, suspend expectations so that we can rebuild them. See, a lot of people want to pretend that they don't want life to be easier. They want to pretend that they're not escaping, pretend that they're not fantasizing. And in that pretense, they end up doing so. Because they only want to give energy and attention to, yes, the positive things. They only want to give energy and attention into the constructive things, the things they're supposed to think, the things they're supposed to say, but at the denial of the other side of the conversation. And when that happens, the conversations become enemies and they attack. And guess who's stuck in the middle? You are. It's what's happening today in our political climate. One side of politics doesn't want to listen to the other side of politics, so they end up attacking each other. Don't allow what we are watching in our political system today to happen in your brain. Because whether you like it or not, both sides of the politics of your brain are there. And if we are to deny and try and crush and quiet the other side, we are becoming totalitarians of our brain. We are becoming dictators of our brain, even in the name of righteousness and positivity. You are becoming a dictator of your brain, and history does not have to play itself out very far to show what happens when dictatorship is in power. I'm asking you to let go of your desire for dictatorship of your own brain and to listen to both conversations. Listen to the desire to escape. Listen to the desire to avoid, so that it can have discussion with the side that you want to engage, that you want to create, so that we can suspend the judgment of both and have a real conversation where everyone gets to be heard, where no one has to be right, where we can suspend the outcomes and get an opportunity to get in touch with where we really are. What are the unconscious excuses and sabotages? We're not going to solve those riddles if we continue to suppress them and ignore them. We're also not going to find the power in gratitude, the power in sacrifice, the power in patience and stillness if we just charge them forward like banners at the front of an army, rather than seek to really understand them, really experience them. I've watched the tools of positivity crush people just as quickly as the tools of negativity. We're so afraid to bring these barriers down in our brain, somehow thinking that if I acknowledge some of the dark things that I think, I will therefore become dark. No, it is often in the suppression of darkness that we become our darkest. It is often in the banal and pompous pursuits of positivity that we lose ourselves. To be able to be in our mind and observe, to suspend what's good and bad and negative and positive, and just observe in here, so that we can then more consciously make the decisions out here that can get us to our ultimate goals, rather than stuck in revolving doors. One of the greatest ways to do that is a process, a principle that we call mental rehearsal. Mental rehearsal involves intentional ways of constructively using your mind. Because if you don't learn to use it constructively, it will continue to learn to use you. Okay? We want to be able to start to build these intentional instructional uses, and mental rehearsal is the arena in which we do that. It's the arena in which we can think about things that haven't happened yet and be able to rehearse them to hopefully be able to influence the outcome that we want to achieve, so that we can suspend judgment and increase familiarity. That's what a mental rehearsal is for. That's how we close our eyes to truly open them to a future that we can not only see, but we can actually be instructed on how to achieve. if it's all about all the worst case scenarios, most of which will never happen, or the fantasies that create a larger gap between our current reality and the one we want, no wonder we're having such a hard time creating what we can actually create. No wonder we're having this hard time of starting back at square one, of feeling like we're never sustaining progression, of continuing to struggle to hopefully conquer, to then struggle some more and hopefully conquer, but never obtaining. Because obtaining comes from a connection to the journey. And a fantasy is a destination. A catastrophe is a destination. A mental rehearsal is a journey. A mental rehearsal, if you start your mental rehearsal and it immediately goes to the outcome you want, the game you want to win, the speech you want a standing ovation for, the income you want to reach, that's fine. But you immediately start to systematically dream in reverse until you get to the piece of ground that is right in front of your toes. Right there. And if you've done so without trying to suppress this side of you want to pretend isn't there, or overinflate this side of you that can't be sustained, then we miss the opportunity to dance with ourselves, to be able to find rhythm in what we do, but continually, positively, but continually seek constancy, to always be good, to always be on our game, because that's what they must be doing. All these successful people must always be amazing, because anytime we see them, they're amazing. So the brain assumes they're always amazing. They're not. I'm not. None of us are. And those of us who are actually getting where we want to be are finding a balance and a rhythm and a dance within our own minds to inspire us on how to dance better out here in reality. And we do so with mental rehearsal. To be able to consider, what is it that I want to accomplish? And what would that pursuit feel like if it had no judgment and it was familiar? What would it feel like to be able to go do something that would typically scare you? What would your life be like if it had judgment suspended and it was familiar? That's what we're looking to obtain. That's what we're looking to achieve. And we can do so in advance with mental rehearsal. But I want you to think of the outcome. Here's the outcome right here. Fantasy and catastrophe take the outcome and play out the worst case scenarios, or the outcome and play out how amazing it would be when. Mental rehearsal takes the outcome and reverse engineers right to the ground that's right in front of your toes. What is the very next step to get there? And not only that, but you're actually encouraged. You may not be excited. Okay? Excitement can be created by catastrophe and fantasy. Okay? They say fear and excitement are the same emotion, but one has oxygen, one is breathing. Okay? Well, they're the same emotion because of what's happening about what's going to play out after the outcome and what it's going to mean about you and how unfamiliar that's going to be in the catastrophe and how much you deserve that without having to do the work in the fantasy. But we won't acknowledge those things because it's just so effortless to do so. It's so easy to just dream about that, to continually plant the flag further and further away. Oh, but because of visualization, we can clearly see the flag. We can even make it a bigger flag. We can even make it amazing and elaborate. But the more we do that with a fantasy or a catastrophe, the further it is getting away. And the more difficult it will become to be able to sustain the journey, to be able to find joy in the journey. That's what mental rehearsal creates. Because if I'm going to go do a speech, I spoke in Phoenix this last weekend, and I spent no time thinking about what I would say. No time thinking about the praise I was going to receive. I mentally rehearsed where the people at that event were at in their lives. I mentally rehearsed the energy, the familiarity of what they're facing at home, what they think about themselves, what they might think about me as it pertains to them. I mentally rehearsed these things with a suspension of judgment, a suspension of whether they would like me, a suspension. I heard that dialogue. Don't get me wrong. That dialogue got to come to the meeting. That ego, okay, that pride, it got to sit at the table and talk. I didn't shut it off. What I did is offered a better solution Thank you so much, ego, for making sure that I remember that I would like people to like me so that I can be more aware of the ways that can serve me and I can be more aware of the ways that can manipulate me. Thank you, ego. I appreciate that. Thank you, pride, for wanting people to post on social media and say how awesome I am. That's so great. I appreciate that. Because you coming to this table allows me to be able to examine how that can help me and how that can manipulate me. So that as I decide how to really serve these people this weekend, now I can do so understanding that those influences are at the table, but they are not my objective and they are not driving the vehicle. They get to come along for the ride because they're very part of me being human. I inherently am a very insecure person. Most people that have ever seen me speak or interacted with me are, to say the least, surprised to hear that. But it is because I have allowed my insecurity to sit at the table that it serves me. I've no longer tried to run it out of town. I now find incredible lessons from that insecurity. Some of them very difficult to learn still. Some of them very painful when that insecurity slips into the driver's seat, because it still happens. But it's not worth sending it out and trying to banish it from my life because of all the wonderful lessons I learned from allowing it to have a seat at the table. And so if we allow this table to exist of both sides, and then we choose to mentally rehearse not the outcome, but the process, not the destination, but the journey. Mental rehearsal is that arena, that discipline to be able to separate ourselves from the outcome. In the rehearsal, we come back to reality and we're ready to go. We still have the outcome in mind, but we have been able to loosen the grip of judgment. We've been able to loosen the grip of expectations just enough to allow ourselves to be creative enough, free-flowing enough, adaptive enough, and find joy in the process enough to be able to sustain that journey. That's what mental rehearsal is for. It is impossible to do without suspending judgment. When I take people through these practices, when we teach people how to harness this, because it would be impossible to do that in 30 minutes on a power session, it all comes down to being able to suspend judgment. I've taken a group to imagining themselves backstage before giving a big speech, even people that were terrified to speak, and they can see the hairstyle, the complexion, the clothing, and even the name of the person who came to put on their microphone, if they're willing to suspend judgment. That's not so that if you ever go speak, you already know the name and the hairstyle and everything of the person that comes and puts on a microphone. That is so that when you're in that position, it feels familiar. See, mental rehearsal is not an exercise of memorization. It is an exercise of familiarity, because when things are familiar to us, we make our gifts more available to them. We find ourselves relaxed, which is actually one of the best ways to go faster and to react quicker. Bruce Lee talked about in his martial arts, to be as relaxed as you can until right before impact, because the contrast of that relaxation and that intensity makes the punch exponentially harder. So it is in our lives. We are mentally rehearsing, familiarizing ourselves with something so that we can unleash all of our gifts upon it. A great example in my dad's book today, Beginning a New Life, called The Three Tomatoes, where a lady had some really tough news to share with the executives about an event that didn't go quite according to plan. And she was terrified. Judgment, expectations were weighing her down like Atlas. And she mentally rehearsed so she could shrug those. And she did so by imagining 3 tomatoes that she would set in front of each of the executives and saying, if what I have to share you don't like at any point, you can chuck this tomato at me. She mentally rehearsed that. She saw it happening, and it immediately relaxed her. It suspended her judgment. It suspended her expectations. It was no longer about an outcome. It was about the experience. And she was able to play out conversations and ways she wanted to present the challenging news to these executives. Now, when she got to the day, she didn't bring the tomatoes, but she brought the energy. She brought the familiarity of what it felt like to have suspended that judgment and to have found that familiarity. You have a gift to do that, but you cannot do it if you continue to surrender to wanting life to be easier and escaping it, or you continue to pretend that those voices aren't there. Because both the surrendering to them and the extinguishing, the suppression of them, have equally destructive impacts. Allow ourselves to be able to create these environments by first suspending our own judgments about our own mind. And second, suspending our expectations about what we should do, what we should not do, what we're supposed to do, what we're not supposed to do. This place will likely be very, very uncomfortable for many of you. Just like if you haven't been working out for a while and you work out for the first time, it's very uncomfortable. But the more often you come back, the more you get to know your body, the more you feel it out, the more you become intentional about your exercise as you do about your recovery, the more you can excel and the better you can become. And it's no different with the mind and the ability to be able to recognize its desire to make things easier, but not allowing it to deploy your greatest gift, to make that a nuclear bomb, but rather to make that never-ending nuclear energy for your life to create your dreams. If this has any of you with your head spinning, it's because this is something I told my producer as soon as we started this. I said, I'm going to have to make this super simple because otherwise this is going to be at least a 3-hour power session. But I hope, I pray that there is some nugget you grab from this to get to think about your own judgment and release it just a little bit more. Think about your expectations for your life, whether perceived from others on you or putting on yourself, and release them just a little bit. If that's what you got out of this, it will serve you. If you want so much more, then we're going to need more than a power session to do that. But we've got tools, we've got processes, we've got opportunities for you to be able to experience the freedom that comes from understanding this place more. And it is our mission here at Habit Finder to be able to teach you that so that you can create greater success for you and those around you that deserve it. Thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate your time. Please let us know how we can serve you. Take care, and we'll see you next time.